Welcome everyone to this thematic forum on building capacities to enable resilience of transitioning infrastructure. Given the current global transition scenario, building the resilience of infrastructure will hinge on incorporating changing climate risk considerations into the standard disaster risk management practices of the infrastructure creators. This session will bring together representatives of member countries to reflect on lessons learned and challenges faced in incorporating disaster risk into infrastructure development and the approaches that have been considered. It will highlight the capacities that need to be built at subnational and local levels, including those of communities who are at the forefront of responding to the impact of clear danger, of clear disaster risk, and infrastructure failures in a transitioning world with increasing interdependencies. Our moderator for the session is Mr. Tanaji Sen. He is the Director, Advocacy and Partnerships at CDRI, a humanitarian work and disaster resilience specialist with 20 plus years of global experience. Tanaji was the Chief Executive Officer, Executive Director of Red R India for 12 years. He was also an elected board member of the Sphere Standards Association and an ex officio board member of Red R USA. The sustained focus of his recent work has been on governance and policy for disaster resilience, multi-stakeholder partnerships, organizational development, design and delivery of capacity building initiatives, and investing in achieving resilience across communities, institutions, and governments. Over to you, Tanaji.
Thank you so much, Aishwarya, for that very generous introduction. Thank you, and good evening to all our guests here in the studio and everyone from around the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's my pleasure and honor to actually moderate this panel and the delight of hosting and organizing this conversation with my colleagues, eminent colleagues from all over the world. Joining me here in the studio today are Professor Kapil Gupta from the Department of Civil Engineering at IIT Mumbai. I would invite all of you to actually go through their eminent profiles on our platform. Also with us here in the studio is Ms. Elizabeth Petheo, the Principal for International Development and Humanitarian Assistance at Miyamoto International. Virtually, we have Dr. Manta Devi Norbut, Associate Professor from the Department of Civil Engineering in the University of Mauritius. Ms. Maria Jose Castillo, the Technical Manager for ECAP, the Central American Institute of Public Administration, and Mr. Ivan Serda, the Technical Coordinator in Incentiva Project of ECAP. This session has three parts. In short, we will start with opening remarks and presentations from all the panelists, which will be followed by a simple poll to keep you all bright and honest this evening. After a long day here, and if you've been online also, post-poll, the session will have a moderated panel discussion where we'll have a couple of questions posed to the panelists, which we hope will draw out a range of global practices and lessons learned on capacity building, which can then inform what we should be doing going forward from this conversation. First and foremost, if I may please invite Professor Gupta to make his opening remarks.
Thank you, Tanaji. And welcome to all the delegates here, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the people worldwide who have tuned in. We have had very good presentations over the past 2 days, and from that it has emerged that we are facing a climate emergency. And could I ask the presentations to come on? Yeah. Next one, please. Yeah. So it is clear from the discussions over the past 2 days that we are indeed facing a climate emergency. Madagascar had 4 cyclones within a span of 25 days, and the recent incidences of heat have taken us all by surprise. And as you are aware, IPCC has identified that there is an increase in frequency of extreme events, both floods and droughts. And over the past 1 year, we have seen that the traditional drainage systems in cities are not able to cope with the extreme rainfall. We have had severe disruptions in New York, London, Sydney, and other cities of the world. And this has shown that most of our critical infrastructure is vulnerable to these extreme climates. Transport, telecommunication, and power all are disrupted, and there is an urgent need for us to develop a disaster resilient infrastructure. With the present heat waves that we are witnessing in various parts of the world, we have seen that there is an increased demand of power. This leads to an overload on the system, and in some cases the failure of the grid. And many of the cities have seen brownouts, whether it is New York or Mumbai. And last year, people died because of extreme heat in Europe because the houses were not designed for extreme temperatures. And of course, even the traditional designed tsunami walls, a couple of years back, the tsunami walls were over-topped, and this caused huge damages in Sendai in Japan. So what has emerged is that the traditional engineering structures have not been designed to take into account the risks because of the extreme climate changes that we have been witnessing recently. Next slide, please. So this has raised an important question that we really need to develop capacities at various levels through both formal education as well as non-formal education. So formal education will target multiple stakeholder groups, starting right from the primary education at the school level, secondary education at the college and universities, and tertiary education through research. Secondly, the non-formal education targeting various need groups would aim to educate the uneducated, the working professionals, and also the non-working and retired stakeholders. Next slide, please. So, and then of course, how do we deliver this? So we need to engage multiple agencies, academia, government, private sector, NGOs, and these measures can be implemented short term, medium term, and long term. Next, please. And here the academia can play a very important role. The stakeholders must be kept updated about the latest developments, which can be used to improve our infrastructure to differing climate conditions. The academia can provide state-of-the-art knowledge to both government and private sector through executive education. Academia can provide expert opinion on resilience strategies for emerging disaster risks and specialized knowledge as commons knowledge pool. Towards this end, international partnerships are extremely desirable for building capacities and developing resilience strategies for transitional infrastructure. That is where CDRA is a very good platform for this. Next slide, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Gupta. So you essentially highlighted that we need to relook at how we are learning and doing technical training and capacity development of engineers and infrastructure professionals, but also that we need to change and shape the future curriculum as we go along and understand what the changing risks are and how they're going to impact the work that infrastructure creators will have to do. May I now invite Ms. Elizabeth Pethio, please, for her opening remarks.
Thank you. First, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the government of India and the United States government for their leadership in bringing us all together and having this conversation. Like many of you in the room here in India and around the world joining us online, we started our work responding to disasters. For me, this was the Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami. And when we think about our why do we do this work? Why is this conversation important? Why is it critical that we come together? It is fundamentally a very human why. Because we have been present to the pain. We have been there to bear witness to the suffering. And we know that we have the ability and the obligation to prevent it from happening in the future. This is an exciting time. We have come from build back better to build better before. And now, as you will hear in this session and in other sessions, the interdependencies of systems, the holistic way of thinking, that it's not just about the hard infrastructure, it's about doing so many things better, to be better before. CDRI is a global movement. It is a global coalition. It is a global partnership spearheading this work, this thinking, and this change of behavior. And it is really a true, true honor to be a part of it. So why am I here speaking with you today? What is my voice at this table? I bring the do. How do we bring it to life? How do we make it happen? How do we bring that why, that very human why, and the what, the technical what, together to deliver the impact that we all desire and we all strive to achieve? Miyamoto has been a decades-long partner to public and private actors in this space. As a multi-hazard engineering and disaster risk reduction firm, we have been there and we will continue to be there. And we've worked hand in hand with partners to raise awareness, to spearhead communication campaigns, from building code compliance in Bangladesh to disaster-resistant construction in Ecuador. We have been catalysts for technical and practitioner networks to come together in new ways. We've enhanced skills. We've worked with policymakers to facilitate decision-making. We've produced original knowledge. We've long advocated for the role of private sector to be at the table on the resilience agenda and to create action with homeowners and masons and policymakers and engineers and architects. And we have listened with humility on what the needs are and have worked in partnership with countries and communities around the world to share what we know and come together to advance this important work. So with that, I want to share 4 thoughts by way of opening. The first is to underscore that building capacity is about more than strengthening individual skills and abilities. While the core of much of what we do in the development space is about the change of behavior and practices, the broader organizational and institutional context is also key. What are the opportunities to use those skills? What are the incentives that are in place to acquire that knowledge? And also understanding that capacity and performance, while related, are oftentimes different. One can have great skills, but not perform. Other support may be lacking, and sometimes this is a question of management, of roles and responsibilities, unclear definitions, a lack of financial support, or broader weaknesses in regulatory frameworks, for example. Oftentimes what is needed is a robust combination of the two, of the technical and the management and the leadership, organizationally and institutionally, to provide the resources and frameworks to accomplish this. Many, many elements. Finally, it's also important to cultivate an appreciation that the process is non-linear. These activities are affected by many factors, many shocks and stressors. This is a dynamic process of learning and adapting, and also taking into consideration the broader economic, political, social factors. The second point that I want to make is about the definition of success. So this is an ongoing discussion around process versus outcome, or process and outcome. But what is important to keep in mind is realistic, gradual strategies that start first with the local operating context, local ownership, and existing capacity and resources. Pragmatic approaches that enable functions to be carried out and achieve resilience objectives over time. Over time. We conducted a Mason knowledge survey in Haiti 10 years after the earthquake the devastating earthquake that showed a significant uptake in seismic resilient construction practices in formal and informal building industry. So these kinds of thoughtful practices put in place and reinforced over time are a good example. The third point I want to make here is around global-local connections. So this is about the thoughtful balance of local leadership and ownership supported in partnership with outside actors. Cultivating a concept of embedded leadership and partnership, when to be hands-on, when to be hands-off. Peer-to-peer learning is a wonderful example of this, a powerful way to share experiences and scale up what works. Oftentimes, practitioners want to learn from practical experience, from others, from each other, from those who've gone through or are facing similar challenges and are connected with ready access. And the fourth point I want to make is, what is it to sustain over time? People move, organizations restructure. It's important to think upfront about how the work can be institutionalized or made routine. So we've discussed that ownership is critical. Ultimately, we also need to ask and develop as a part of our activities, can institutions and can organizations sustain on their own? Do they have the capacity to develop and implement appropriate policy and regulatory frameworks? Can they manage and build partnerships and manage resources? Do they have a process for taking on information and adapting? How do they monitor progress and document their experiences? This helps for accountability, but also learning to improve their own performance for quality and relevance at the local level. Sustainability is also about cultivating champions, those with the will and the commitment over time, again, over time, understanding the local context. Who will lead? Who will influence? Who will convene? Who will act? This is key. So in sum, the do is a process. And it's important to consider first that capacity building capacity, strengthening capacity is about more than just individual skills and abilities. The second, it's really important that we continue to define and have a discussion about what success means in this space. The third is about global-local connections, peer-to-peer learning, embedded leadership, co-creation models of partnership. And finally, it's very important to think upfront about what it's going to look like and what it will take to sustain over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You almost gave us the 4 premises which we need to work on to shape the capacity development program of CDRI and similar multilaterals. I'm very grateful for that. So thank you so much. And I think the essence of what you're saying is that what you do with capacity building is build systems, institutions, and values. So that's a great takeaway to have from that opening remark. Thank you. If I may please invite Dr. Naubuth now, please, for her opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'm Anta Naubuth, and I'm from the University of Mauritius, and I'm here with you to share our experience as a small island. Now, small island is being impacted by climate change. This is something that it is well recognized. But what is not fully recognized at times is the way we are coping with the situation. So we have tried on our own to find solutions because we have to adapt. We have to build our resilience. We have to be prepared. So we have come up with some measures, and I believe that this would be interesting to share to a wider community and also to learn from each other. So thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Naubuth. So essentially, knowledge sharing, knowledge transfer, skills transfer, solutions is what you are focusing and inviting when it comes to the context of SIDS. So, great, thank you so much. And if I may now please invite Ms. Maria Castillo for her presentation, which is a recorded statement, if I may submit.
The Central American Institute of Public Administration is an international intergovernmental organization that forms part of the Central America Integration System, specializing in public administration, promoting the development of human resources, and modernizing the public sector. Since 2010, ECAP has developed a regional training program to incorporate the approach of disaster risk management and adaptation to climate change in public investment projects with ministries of planning, finance, economy, and governing bodies of disaster risk management at the national and regional levels. During 2016, ECAP, together with the Inter-American Development Bank and the coordination of the Center for Disaster Prevention in Central America, CEPREDENAC, developed a project called Regional Mechanism for Integrated Risk Management and Adoption of Climate Proofing in Public Infrastructure. The purpose of the project was to develop a toolbox through methodologies, training, and technical assistance for local governments and national systems to acknowledge risk management and the adoption of climate-proofing measures in public infrastructure. As a result of that experience, ECAP developed training and workshops for public officials from Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Panama, and the Dominican Republic to communicate from an academic and practical point of view methodologies to reduce the risk of disasters and propose adaptations to reduce the effects of the climate change on priority public infrastructure in both national and subnational governments. Also, in January 2021, ECAP has developed, together with the German corporation GIC, through the Global Initiative for Disaster Risk Management, a project named Incentiva that seeks to strengthen the national public investment system with technological tools that promote the formulation, evaluation, and prioritization of public investment projects in view of the post-pandemic economic recovery. During the year 2021, several face-to-face and virtual meetings were held with the objective of learning about the specific situation of the national investment public systems related to project formulation and incorporation of risk analysis approach. As a component of Incentiva project, ECAP designed a specialization program in public investment projects with a focus on climate proofing and risk. During 6 months, 34 public officials from Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama, Dominican Republic, and Uruguay were awarded scholarships to attend the program. This training focused on the incorporation of risk management and climate change adaptation approach in the formulation of public investment projects. In November 2021, in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic, ECAP and GIC, together with the Ministry of Economy, Planning and Development of the Dominican Republic, held the first Incentiva high-level seminar. The event brought together authorities of national and regional institutions and international organizations, and as a major highlight of the seminar, a signing of an agreement called Carta de Punta Cana took place. Incentiva project is supported by ECAP Center of Innovation for Sustainable Development, which will provide sustainability. Through the collaboration between the countries and the Punta Cana Agreement, public officials from the public investment departments of 7 countries attend a regional workshop on March 2022 in San Jose, Costa Rica, with the main purpose of review and test the Incentiva Groupware information system. Incentiva Groupware will be officially launched during the month of June 2022 in Panama at the second Incentiva High-Level Seminar. In this framework, ministers, investment directors, decision makers, regional authorities, representatives of international organizations, cooperation agencies, and experts related to public investment, disaster risk management, and climate change adaptation will meet again to get acquainted with the system. During the second semester, workshops will be held in each of the 7 countries in order to build capacities in the use of this regional public good. This is one more result where ECAP, a regional international organization of the Central American Integration System, shares its knowledge and experiences, communicates and promotes an innovative and sustainable vision of the management of resilient investment projects.
That was great. Thank you so much, Ms. Castillo. I know that you've actually been also able to join us live this evening, but you were preparing, you were not sure. So thank you so much for that recorded video. It was quite insightful, and it was very interesting to see how multiple countries, investments, risks, climate change, everything that we talk about was blended together to create a capacity building program, which has actually reached out and tried to build both individual and institutional capabilities to address risks and investments which are made for public infrastructure. So thank you. Just now that we've had the opening remarks from our 4 panelists, I'm just going to throw back and connect with the audience to check if you can run the poll, please. There will be a poll up in your system. If you are on your apps in the studio, then you will be able to access the poll, but it's going up live. I hope it works. There is, we can't participate in the poll. So. I can read out the question, which is based on the opening remarks, which of the following should be a priority for capacity development to enhance the design and delivery of resilient infrastructure? Institutional, individual, enabling environment, academic, all of the above. Well, we have a very informed audience who say all of the above, 67, 2/3. So that's great. So I think just to keep us, honest, late in the evening, that essentially, I mean, you can work on each one of these, but if you're able to work something like the ECAP initiative, which addresses all of the 4, then you're actually making the right noises and doing the right thing. Thank you so much for that. I'll move to the next part of the session where I'll invite our panelists in the same order to please reflect on this one question that, based on the poll and the conversation we've just had till now, how do we ensure institutional capacity development for strengthening resilience in infrastructure systems? What do you, Professor?
Right. So, in my opinion, we need to have a large-scale capacity development would be required, and this would require focus from both top-down and bottom-up. And the institutional leadership has to be sensitized so that the acceptance of new knowledge in the work culture of the organization has to be mainstreamed, and simultaneously suitable offerings have to be introduced for the employees of the organization. And for this we have to have in the first phase training of the trainers, so that then it can be scaled up to the various organizations. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth, what do you reckon? what do we do to ensure institutional capacity development for infrastructure resilience?
So three points that I'd like to make on that. One is attention to the planning process, not the plan. The plan needs to be there, but the process is really critical. Thinking about things from a relational point of view rather than a transactional point of view, because the process itself is a really key element. The second is attention to the management systems to make sure that there's a good balance of what can be identified and measured and managed. And the third is that attention to the lasting impact and the sustainability that I mentioned earlier, so that local ownership is really there. And then, of course, things like monitoring and evaluation, coordination and training enhance that sort of holistic view. Those are the 3 points that I would put forward.
Thank you. I'm going to try and stitch all of this together. I've got some very good points from our first two speakers. Dr. Norbut, what do you think would be critical to ensure institutional capacity development? And I know that you're doing a lot of interesting work in Mauritius with the different infrastructure ministries. So,
yeah, in fact, I would say that being from the academia, we have had the opportunity to sit on many national committees. And because of that, we have a feel of what is needed. Now, as far as capacity building is concerned, I believe that each institution have their requirements, but at the same time, academia can train a large workforce, the workforce that is needed to be more climate smart, the workforce that needs certain skills, that are imparted with certain skills, and are able to help different institutions according to their requirement. For example, to carry out vulnerability assessment, to create risk map, to understand how climate resilient framework works. So this is part of what academia can do. But at other institution level, coming down from decision makers up to community, each one will have their requirements. And then we need to address those capacity as per the requirements. There's not only awareness that we have to build, we also have to empower people, to engage the people in the process. Because at this point in time, we can't rely only on reactive process. We have to be more proactive, and for that we need the engagement of each and every one. Thank you, Chair.
thank you so much, Dr. Norbut. If I can go to Maria, please. Smash Castillo, for your thoughts. You've done some great work in that.
Thank you, Tanahi. And good evening, everyone in the studio. Good evening for the panelists. And good morning, everyone here in America, in North America, Central America, and South America. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with every one of you and share our experience in ECAP. And well, ensuring the development of institutional capacities is not an easy task, because there are different problems and several realities in Central America, and those are very hard to homologate. And it is crucial for the region to support technology tools associated with the pre-investment project stage. For example, Incentiva Group, where, as I present in the video record, it's a practical tool that was developed as a collaborative effort among 7 countries. Since January 2021, ECAP has been working with public servants. It works with the investment departments of 7 countries to determine their needs. In that sense, it has been assessed their need to improve the process in the project formulations. And we have 4 examples. To improve the capacities of public servants with tools that standardize and organize the project formulation as Incentiva Group were, and how could be possible its application in our countries? Well, we suggest applying the general methodological guidelines or the specific ones, moving them to Incentiva Group work. In this way, it's possible to create the necessary baseline to start the project formulation with risk management approach and adopt climate proofing measures for public infrastructure. And also to continue the capacity building local and sectoral government officials that could be working on energy, water, environment, public ministries, and so on, and to work specifically on the methodological guidelines to apply the perspective of systemic risk and multiple hazard in the context of climate change in the project formulation, and to advance in the development of technological standards that may be applied to the national management of investment systems. In conclusion, or finally, Incentiva Group offers the possibility of developing targeted training for local and national governments to improve the quality of the projects, incorporating a perspective in risk assessment and generating measures for adaptation to climate change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Castillo. That was very interesting. So, having heard the four speakers, the one key trend that I'm clearly hearing is that you need to have an attention to the impact of or the result that you want to achieve through your capacity building, whether it's through workforce enhance at a workforce level, or whether it's targeted learning that needs to be done to improve capabilities, or whether that's through provision of tools or solutions which will enable better practices. So in each of these, what we're hearing is that identify the learning, identify what the need is, and how you address it. Now, there are different approaches to doing it, is what I gather. One of which is to take a macro perspective and understand what management changes or results that are you targeting. The second of which is you identify what a new knowledge requirement or a skill requirement is. You design a learning process around it, and you use either a top-down or a TOT approach to scale up and expand that. But importantly, what I also heard both from the Mauritius and from Central America is that it doesn't stop at strategic capacity building at a national level. You need to go down to the subnational, to the local, to the community, which was also emphasized by Ms. Patel. So this is very interesting. But essentially, I would also bring back the point that Ms. Patel made, which was the planning process, the relational aspect of building capacities is critical to how you shape the results of what come out of that capacity building endeavor. So thank you so much for those observations and inputs. They're very fascinating, and in the next part, we're going to have individual questions directed to you to move forward. That we've heard of what we've been doing and what possibly needs to be done, but we live in a time where we know that physical climate risks are increasing, but there is also the underlying fact that geophysical hazards are equally important and may end up causing significantly more damage in one event occurrence than repeated physical climate events. And in this context, we've got the global energy targets that we need to do, and we still need to build infrastructure for communities and people. So going forward, Professor Gupta, what do you think needs to evolve in civil engineering for infrastructure resilience in this transitioning context?
Thank you, Dhanaji. So, studies project that in the next 20 years, the investment in infrastructure is going to be much in excess of what has been done in the past 200 years. And obviously, this investment cannot be implemented in the way it has been done earlier because of new challenges due to climate change and weather extremes. So we need to examine and see that the civil engineering curriculum, which was based on experience of the past, now has to include the challenges of the future. And we need to make significant changes in the civil engineering curriculum to meet this requirement. So it requires new subjects to be taught, new concepts to be introduced, and new ways in which it should be done. For example, engineering planning should be integrated with concepts of sustainability and constructability, which of course include the focus on the nature-based solutions, which was talked of earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gupta, and for the pullback to the nature-based solutions conversation, which we just finished a short while back. Thank you. Ms. Pratyog, as a partner who's delivering infrastructure resilience and working with multiple governments and international organizations, what role do you foresee capacity development playing in improving decision-making processes in infrastructure resilience and or the development and investment of infrastructure?
So 4 areas that I would like to highlight. One is to consider a combination of activities. So, we often focus on a workshop or a knowledge product or, a specific area, but how do those things combine together in a strategic way over time to reinforce messages, to connect dots, to support the process of decision making? So that's one consideration. The second is to look at fostering buy-in, identifying key partners, relevant stakeholders. As we've said over and over again, the opportunities for voice and priority to surface from multiple contributions, multiple places. The process ownership, not just the product ownership, is a critical part of this. The third point that I would make is to identify and build on previous activities. Oftentimes, we think we're starting something new, but there is groundwork, there is work that has come before. So how do we build upon that and look again for continuity to expand or increase what oftentimes are short bursts of engagement? How do we strategically weave those together into a longer term outcome of existing and complementary new initiatives? And finally, identifying and targeting local actors, making sure that we are thinking about the different roles of public, private, academic community in that systems view to really make it stick long term.
Thank you. Long term. Think longer than the immediate and process your actions accordingly. That's interesting, and it's easier said than done, and I know it's something that we have to do. But we can go back to your 4 premises of the 4 value propositions, which can probably drive that. Dr. Norwood, what can other small island states learn from the experience of Mauritius in developing capacities for infrastructure professionals? And how do we enable that experience and sharing and peer learning?
For me, I think for small islands, it is very important for us to appreciate that we need to develop our own local experts. We need to invest in our own people. We need those local experts because they are going to be the champions that's going to help and support different organizations to address and mainstream climate change in the development of infrastructure. Because as it is, currently, the existing workforce, they don't have those knowledge. They have not been trained in those areas, and they need more, let's say, support, more, guidance in certain aspect. I would share with you the feedback that we had from the private sector. They said we need appropriate guidelines. Give us the guidelines. We will follow that so that we can minimize the risk. We had people from the urban planning who said, tell us how to construct in high risk areas. So we need our local expert trained in those specific areas, and SIDS can do that through their academia. Why is it through the academia? Is simply because academia tends to work with many different types of stakeholders, from policymakers, from professionals, to the private sector, to the community. We work with all of them. We tend to be represented in different national committees. So we can regroup those people. And I would recommend that SIDS invest and work with their universities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Norwood. And I hear you when you say that we need to work at the local level, build the local capacities, enable the knowledge and skills transfer there, work with the academia, they understand the realities, they have the connections that are required to leverage different partners and stakeholders. And importantly, I call back on what you said in your last response, which is you engage to empower and do it proactively. And that's what you learn from SIDS, from the experience of Mauritius, and we need to also enable the facilitation of that transfer between SIDS, because their realities are very different from the realities that we have in big states, big cities. So thank you so much for that. We are also joined by a colleague, Ivan Serda, who I had taken the liberty of not introducing earlier. But he's going to take the next question on behalf of ECAP, which is that having done all of this work over the last 7, 8 years, 5 years, particularly the last 2 years, I'm amazed at the kind of work that you all have been able to do in the Incentiva project, despite the challenges of COVID. So what nuances and approaches are required to build capacities for enhancing infrastructure governance across different types of countries and administration structures? Over to you, Ivan.
First of all, I would like to extend my best wishes both the organization of this important event and the participants of this space for conversation and exchange of experience. I believe that when we talk about governance, we must necessarily consider actors that generate interdependence in order to generate more public value. We could ask the question, at what phase can governance be strengthened to generate better standards in infrastructures? I believe it should be from the pre-investment phase, especially in the formulation of public investment project. And how to achieve this? For this, it's necessary to have an in-depth knowledge of the reality of national institutions and local governments. Because in Central America, we have different realities in terms of institutional capacities, but we share similar challenges since, according to the 6th report IPCC, the region is one of the most vulnerable to climate change in the world. This situation becomes very complicated if the countries do not have sufficient capacity to generate and implement effective public policies, methodologicals, and tools that enable them to manage and incorporate a risk management approach. Furthermore, due to high staff rotation and staff reduction, the capacity of local governance officials are limited to holistically understand disaster risk and establish measures to adapt the population, service, and infrastructure to climate change. So, clearly, the issue is complex, multifactorial, and needs a long process to understand and reduce disaster risk. A human group in charge of an elementary function and with few capability require a system of constant and progressive training in the medium and long term. This means that training program once a year is not enough. It's not enough. But a medium and long-term program can generate permanent capability with the possibility of the advancing in the courses and even validating them and getting academic degrees. And with this, ECAP gives an answer that fits these needs, since it offers wide possibility for local governance officials to obtain diplomas, master, even doctorates as they advance in their professional training.
Thank you, Ivan. Yes, please, carry on. Do you want to add something further?
No. Finally, this not only strengthens the response capacity of local governments, but also their critical and prospective capacity to manage risk. And it provides opportunity for professionals to develop practical knowledge projects, programs, and investment or land management in local governments. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ivan. So that's very interesting. So what you're basically saying is, of course, you need to provide the methodologies and the tools that can enable improved capacities to be expressed. But you need to not only do a training on that or to equip them, but you need to sustain it with a program which probably provides peer or mentoring support or sustained recaps of the tool and its application, understand how they're applying it and the learning that they're accruing from it. So it's a process and it's long term, something which even Elizabeth was talking about. So that's very fascinating. And one of the things that you said is, we have still got the time or the opportunity potentially of trying to make this change in capabilities, understanding of risks and what needs to be done at a pre-investment stage, because we are developing and building new infrastructure. Most of the developing world or the least developed countries and states are going to make that generational shift in infrastructure investments. What we're going to do in the next 20 years is going to be 4 or 5 times what has been done in the last 200 years. So there is an opportunity to still change and influence the narrative by doing targeted capacity building, which works across multiple levels. So thank you so much for that response. With that, we have, in a way, come to a close of the structured questions. I'm going to defer to the hall for, in the studio, both for in-audience questions, and if there are any questions on the virtual platform, then please let me know. Thank you. Yes, over to you, please.
Thank you, panelists. Just a small question. I think I could direct it to Ms. Pateo. You spoke about decision making just now, and in the context of uncertainty, changing governments, changing decision making systems also evolving around time, institutional mechanisms changing so quickly. What capacity development would you advocate for? What would be a strategy you could say that could help taking long-term decisions more sustainably and more for resilient infrastructure? I guess it's a difficult question because it's got a lot of uncertainty even in understanding those paths. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I think what it underscores is the need for flexibility in the approach. And we talk a lot about adaptive management and learning as we go, but I think there are core things that can be institutionalized. We talked about academic partners and associations and technical bodies where there are core institutions that will sustain even if there is changeover. So how do you embed knowledge in those places so that that natural sort of turnover can sustain over time? In terms of planning processes, I mean, that is going to have to continue to evolve as there's new information coming in. Also, I think those global networks, I mean, when we talk about peer-to-peer learning, communities of practice, site visits, cultivating things like that, I mean, that helps to update based on the operating context because you can pull knowledge globally from where it needs to go. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. If I were to take that question and get a perspective from, say, Professor Gupta or Professor Naubod, if this is the sort of change that is going to be required, because I'm hearing more around systems and processes, does it actually change the way what is taught of infrastructure professional needs any tweaking, or do you think the basics and fundamentals stay the same? It's the executive learning that needs to be focused on.
In my opinion, we have witnessed rapid changes and a lot of new information has come in, a lot of new materials have been developed, and we must make use of both the knowledge and the advantages that the new materials offer to build better and more resilient infrastructure for the extremes that we have faced in the past 10 years and the increased extremes that we would be facing in the future. Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to add that with the experience that we are getting from climate impacts, in fact, over the last 10 years, we have been experiencing lots of climate disasters. So we have now a good feel of what is not working, where we should not have constructed, how we should have constructed, and it would have been better in the face of climate change. So we can capture that knowledge and learn from that. And even those sectors like urban planning have to be brought in to reduce the impact and also to position infrastructure in better places. But at the same time, we can consider how to design infrastructure with respect to their minimum height above ground. So this can also help people, like in a sense, living with the impacts of climate change, because we can't stop that, but at least we can minimize the losses. Thank you.
Thank you. So you're saying more of the same, but slightly better, slightly more informed and slightly more learned based on the changing patterns and the information that's coming in. We have a question from the audience, I see. The virtual audience, not in the studio. So the question says, how are major infrastructure systems undergoing transitions to net zero? How do major infrastructure systems undergoing transitions to net zero deal with capacity gaps? That's the question. Who would like to take it on for a response? I can repeat the question. The question is, how are major infrastructure systems, say data centers, telecom sector, ICT infrastructure, power, transmission, distribution, undergoing transitions to net zero, deal with the capacity gaps? Because, yeah, do you want to go, Professor Gupta? Yeah.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, we have a huge talent globally, and with the better and improved communication facilities like internet and virtual calls, we need not actually travel to the places. We can meet virtually, and we can tap the talent existing globally. And in my opinion, we are having the talent spread in all corners of the world, and we should pull this talent together, and the capacity gaps that existed within a country, they can now be tapped using the global talent pool to address these challenges of the major infrastructure that are coming up. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gupta. So basically you're saying, just like the infrastructure systems are transitioning and there are challenges and there is a lot of learning and experience around the world, let's use one of our biggest infrastructure capabilities, which is the ICT systems around the world, which connect us, and access that resource and knowledge and know-how, even if it's required virtually. So that's one way of doing it. Anyone else would like to venture a thought? Please.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes, yeah. I'd like to share our experience. Being from small islands, we rely or we work a lot with international partners. So we also tap resources, and I would say that not only expertise, but we can have organizations which have already implemented similar projects to share the lessons learned. Mm-hmm. And given that we are addressing climate change, this is more like a social responsibility, and I'm sure that many would be willing to share this information. Thank you, Chair.
Mm-hmm. True. Thank you so much. In fact, there are plenty of other global examples of where companies operating infrastructure systems have had to go through bankruptcy or suffer stranded asset scenarios because of climate change and financial regulations, and just the unfortunate fact that they never expected a heat wave of 48 degrees centigrade on the west coast of the United States. So what do you do? So these are challenges which you need to probably estimate, assess, and identify. And as we learn from the ECAP experience, you look at what needs to be done at the planning stage and build in the systems and capacities for that. That's one way of addressing those gaps. But I think there are no more questions on the screen, which means there are no further questions. So if you don't have any further responses on this, then I'll go on the reverse order and request for your closing message and reflection on what needs to be done for capacity development in this transitioning context, external transitioning environmental context for infrastructure resilience. So if I can go back to Ms. Castillo, please. What do you think? What's your key message to us and the wider audience on what needs to be done?
Thank you, Tanahi. Well, first, we want to thank for the invitation to this event. For us, it has been a pleasure to share with all of you the ECAP experience. And well, just to say that to build resilience, it is necessary to strengthen the vulnerability of local governments in the case of Central America. One of the major problems in the Central American region is the lack of the capacity to understand and manage the risk management associated with hydrometeorological hazards that are strongly influenced by climate change and climate variability. For these reasons, all training should be connected with other training ranging from the simple to the complex, which should be developed systematically in the medium and the long term and offer the possibility of academic improvement to local government officials. In this way, it will be possible to generate upward capacities on a permanent basis. Likewise, it's essential that training is not only theoretical, but that it can be approached in a practical way with local examples, the application of national methodological guidelines, and the use of the technology tools. For this purpose, ECAP has developed an information system, as we told you before, Incentiva Group work. And finally, this lays the foundations for the development of digital governance in the processes linked to formulation of projects at the local level. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for those closing thoughts. If I can now go to Dr. Norbert, please.
Yeah. Okay. For me, I believe that to be able to adapt to the changing situation, the different challenges, we need to impart education for an adaptive, let's say, workforce, a climate ready or a climate smart workforce, a workforce that will have adequate skills to be able to help them adapt to the situation, critical skills, lifelong learning skills, and also be able to adapt, but while sustaining the development of the country. Okay, challenges are going to grow, so we need a new type of workforce on the market. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So climate smart workforce informed by tools and methodologies that have been already implemented in Central America. I think we have a plan. Sounds great. Thank you so much. But those are really good ideas. I mean, because that's what we want to do: share knowledge, share resources and experiences. Ms. Petio.
Yes. Allow me to bring it all together in a crisp way. So let's say process and product, systems and skills.
Nice. Have a process, have the product, put up a system, and then you will have the skills. Lot to do. Those 4 words mean a lot, but yeah, that's a good way of summarizing. Thank you so much. Professor Gupta.
Well, I think we all seem to be in agreement, because before the distinguished participants had expressed their views, I had tried to sum up that there is an urgent need to scale up the imparting of new knowledge to the manpower both technical and managerial, to construct a resilient infrastructure in high-risk areas, considering the increased extremes due to climate change and sea level rise. And that is exactly what all of us have been saying in different languages. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so much, and it's been a delight. I mean, I don't have much further to say. There's a lovely statement we have from Professor Gupta, summarized in 4 words by Elizabeth, and demonstrative examples of what needs to be done from Costa Rica and Mauritius. So thank you so much, all of you, for joining us this morning, very early in the morning, this afternoon, and this evening. It's been a pleasure to moderate this session. Capacity building is something which runs in my veins, so I'm very delighted to have had the opportunity to moderate this session with all of you. This actually brings us to a close for the second day of ICDRI 2022. I hope our audience virtually have had an engaging day. Please do let us know your thoughts, and we look forward to having you back with us tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, bye.